Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Braden. I'm the SVP of Sales for Enzo Data, and I want to thank you for spending some time with us this evening and joining us on our series of educational webinars, starting this evening with Embracing the Future, the Evolving Role of the Sleep Technologist. All right, so with that, I'm going to kick it off and introduce our presenter tonight, Andrea Ramberg. A little bit about her. She spent over a decade in sleep medicine, learning every component of polysomnography, from clinical to administrative. She's double credentialed with RPSGT and CCSH and holds a bachelor's in psychology, and she's currently pursuing a master's in industrial and organizational psychology. She piloted and spearheaded an inpatient sleep scoring program that was featured in the 2018 August-September issue of Sleep Review magazine. I know a lot of you are here because you had an opportunity to learn about that. And from there, she went on to consult with hospitals nationwide, helping them start their own programs. Andrea joined our Enzo Data team in August of this year as our clinical informaticist to help us move sleep into the future. And she volunteers as treasurer on the board of registered polysomnographic technologists, along with various work with the AAST and World Sleep Congress. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you. So when we look at the learning objectives for today, what is technology's impact on the role of the sleep technologist? Why is sleep navigation important to the future of the industry? What that sleep navigator role means for hospitals, physicians, and patients, what is actually involved in an inpatient screening program, understanding the skill set that is needed to thrive in the inpatient setting, because it's totally different than the outpatient setting, and identifying potential program hurdles and solutions to the challenges. So moving towards the future, we have seen for a while how this diagnostic process is changing, right? Like the HSATs, especially this year, with COVID hitting and everything, how it's advancing and allowing us to still get our patients tested and treated. The wearables that are coming out, the new technology. I believe Robert gave a great talk this morning at the Carolina Sleep Society about the different technology that is coming out. And hello, if anybody's seen the Apple Watch commercial, I mean, how crazy is that? Everything that they're being able to do with this watch now. So, we see that technology is increasing access to care, it's improving outcomes, and it's enhancing patient and physician satisfaction, while at the same time reducing costs. But where does that leave sleep technologists? As this advances, where does that leave us? We have to find a new mindset in order to get new results. There has to be a change if we want to see a different variety in results. And there comes this point where we look at like resistance, right? Where we're kind of, I don't know about this, is this really where we need to go? And to get to it, the adaptation of it. So all the older individuals in this field who have been there for a while are going to understand this, that when we shifted from the paper to the digital recordings, I have heard stories from all my old mentors, all of my old Deb Borgeson, who taught me sleep, would always talk about hearing the changes, in the pens, right? Like, so it would shift and they would maybe see or maybe hear a seizure activity, or a shift in arrhythmia. And so I think, with that, what happens is we need to understand how that shift helps us see things differently. I think at first they were like, well, how am I ever supposed to, see that difference in the, from the pen to the paper? But I think once we know now is that it's allowed us to work smarter, not harder, and create those better outcomes for our patients. Everybody, Netflix and binge, Netflix and chill, Netflix. So they switched from a DVD to a full streaming. And if you think about it at the time, that was basically cannibalizing their business model. And they took a hit at first, but then they moved into the future with streaming of what we now all know and do. So there was a learning curve of it being less efficient at first, but then shooting ahead to a place no one thought possible. And if they didn't have the wherewithal to think like that, we're going to move into the future and it might be a little uncomfortable at first, but this is where we need to be, they might not have been able to create that, where we're at today. And then the e-commerce. So with COVID this year hitting, people used to be able to go into stores and browse, and that's really where they targeted a lot of things. They didn't really have, a lot of stores didn't really have a lot of efficiency with online shipping and online shopping. So one such company that was able to navigate these drastic changes quickly and decisively was Levi Strauss, because they had invested in digital technologies such as AI and predictive analysis way before the pandemic hit. They were able to fulfill online orders from its stores, enabling a change that took a few days instead of the month it would have taken had they not had the ability to transform data and facts into action. According to CFO Harmit Singh, we're using this technology alongside our own customer expertise and judgment to drive better results. And I see that correlation with, what we're experiencing in sleep. How can we use that technology to drive better results? And I think there's this mindset that technology is going to take our jobs, right? Like if it's doing it that much faster, why do they need me? But I think it's important to shift our mindset to technology will empower us to create better patient outcomes, right? Working together is how we're going to create those outcomes. Okay, so when we look at it, what is AI, right? We hear this all the time, and I think some of us probably get an idea in our head of, I don't know any Westworld fans out there, but that's my first thing that I think of when I see AI and this concept of, Terminator, the iRobot, the Matrix, Wall-E. We see them as either these villains that are coming to take over the world, or this robot that's trying to really form that human relationship, that human compassion. And in reality, what is really AI is more of a behind the scenes player rather than that star of the show. The artificial intelligence allows the analysis of big data. AI at its most basic concept involves the development of computer algorithms, programs, and software systems that can perform tasks normally completed by a human. Machine learning is a type of AI that learns and adapts to improve its performance over time. So as more data is fed into the machine and algorithms and everything, it gains that additional experience. And unlike the old auto scoring solutions, which relies on inputs from the programmer, machine learning systems evolve and iterate on their own. New data is the key, as it's constantly being fed in fresh batches from all different sources that help the algorithm kind of poke holes in what they always thought was there, right? And its own logic. And it expands its decision-making tree, one execution at a time. But there's something that AI cannot give: the human touch. Robots can do well-defined tasks, but none have mastered humans' ability to multitask or use common sense. Renowned AI researcher Stuart Russell stresses that while AI systems may be able to mimic human empathy, they can't truly understand what empathy is. It's a distinction Stuart believes is really important. You can have them simulate empathy, but part of what humans value is that you actually care, not that you appear to care. A robot may be able to mimic when they see you cry the tears, but they don't understand what's underneath that. And isn't that the whole component of human empathy? So empathy is extremely effective and under-leveraged key to unlocking productivity in organizations. Providing the empathy and compassion needed when working with patients is still something that only a clinician can do. Unlike AI, a clinician can read the facial and body clues of a patient and meet them where they are at in their clinical pathway. They can read that patient. They could read the signs of their face that they're not showing in their words and react accordingly. When clinicians have more time, they can better educate their patients on what to expect, what their diagnosis means to them, and what treatment options are available. Building relationships with patients not only helps to cultivate better comprehension of their diagnoses, but also fosters a collaborative environment that helps adherence, communication, and wellness. The Sleep Health Navigator can help foster that continuum of care and provide education to our patients, medical peers, and communities. So why is Sleep Health Navigator? What is your why of doing something? It really is if you look at it, a transition of care from the inpatient to the outpatient world. It is so crucial to the success of the patient adhering to the medical care plan. You know, one of the first things that struck me was coming from an outpatient sleep lab, how little I truly knew about the rhythms of a hospital system and the language that they speak in there, and the care that that patient is being provided in the inpatient setting changes when they go to the outpatient setting. It's a whole disconnect. And how can we in the sleep field help navigate that? Help the patient understand that they're leaving a world where these answers are easily available to a world they kind of have to figure it out on their own. And it's a safe transition from a safe to the unknown. And it's also education with patients and staff, how sleep apnea could be exacerbating their comorbid conditions. To us in the sleep field, we see this, right? We see the comorbid conditions that are obvious to us, but I think I was always astounded at how little was really known about these correlations. Oh, you mean my patient that is here for congestive heart failure could have something else going on that's exacerbating it? No idea, right? Or they had no idea how the timeliness of treatment could help them treat that patient right then and there. Preventing readmissions, you know, the risk assessment, let's keep our patients safe. Will review a study a little later on rapid responses. You know, let's keep them safe while they're there. And knowing and understanding the why of what we do in sleep health can help you expand your career into the less known pathways in sleep. You know, think about what we can do differently. So when you look at all of these other different subspecialties, right, that are involved in diagnosis and treatment, I bet you if I did a poll right now and asked you to name how sleep would have effect of every single one of these, everybody can do it. I mean, this is like basic stuff to us in the sleep field. What I am seeing is a huge interest for these specialties and many, many more to come into our realm, is to come into the sleep field, is to, you know, I want to learn more about sleep now. I know, you know, dentistry, but let me see what I could do. I look at airways all day. This is a piece of cake. Let's figure out a way in which instead of them coming into the sleep field, how can we go into their realm, right? How can we learn about that stuff? How can we insert ourselves into these other subspecialties and provide a way to offer our expertise in there? We all know how little or how stretched thin sleep physicians are these days. I mean, there's just not enough to go around. And physicians in general are just stretched really thin. They've got time constraints. There's so many advances that are happening that they can't keep up with. And there's all this new ways of being measured that they need a little bit of help with. And I see us in the sleep field as kind of being an arm of that physician and being able to help them. How do we help them improve the diagnosis so they can get to more patients in a more timely manner? The CCSH credential. I see the CCSH credential as really helping to facilitate this role. You know, it's coordinating and managing that patient care. It's improving those outcomes because we're spending that time to educate the patients and the community, not to mention other medical disciplines, about the importance of sleep. And advocating to everybody, you know, it's really being that individual where we're not going to go away. We're passionate about it, and why, the reasons why they actually need to listen. So, you know, when I talk about other specialties and I talk about all this stuff, I really want us to start thinking as a sleep field, how to expand, how do we think outside the box and put ourselves into places where it's not the traditional role, you know, it's not doing the sleep studies, it's not even scoring the studies during the day. What can we do to kind of push the boundaries and really expand sleep into this next level. I know a lot of people, this concept is thrown out a lot, right? Value-based healthcare. And really, okay, yeah, what does this really mean? And the best way that I can describe it and the best way that I've seen is it's a shift from treating that patient right in front of you. So that patient comes in, let's say, for example, in the hospital with a heart attack. Of course, the cardiologist has to treat what's right in front of them, but now they're also being measured of transitioning their care to the outpatient world and nutrition, and the outcomes that are involved with that. So not only do they have to treat that patient right there in front of them, it's happening right in front of them, but they also have to make sure that those outcomes are where they want it to be, even when the patient's not in front of them. So how can we do that? How can we help them achieve those outcomes and goals? This slide has been all over too. It's, and I think it's always struck me, and why I love to still put it in a lot of my presentations is we see sleep apnea patients wherever we go. I think in the sleep field, we can recognize it so much easier than everybody else. And what is so crazy to me is that we still have 80% undiagnosed. 80, where I feel like we're living in a world where we're more reactive than being proactive. What are we doing to actively improve that? An 80% undiagnosed, let's start putting our brains together to think of how can we be more proactive with this? How can we seek out those 80%? Because we are seeing a huge volume in our sleep labs, but that's just a fraction according to this chart. And it really is astounding to me that is still exists. So Medicare created the Hospital Readmissions Reduction Program. And the theory with that is the patients that are readmitting, they are saying that you need to provide a better outcome for those patients. You need to be doing more to ensure that they don't readmit. In the fiscal year 2019, 82% of hospitals in the program received those readmission penalties. The annual cost of penalties totaled $26 billion. So if 82% of hospitals are still getting these readmissions, I think a lot has been done to reduce it, but I think all of us can raise our hands and say how sleep can help with that. So CMS includes the following 6 condition or procedure-specific 30-day risk standardized unplanned readmission measures. They're looking for individuals that came in for that heart attack, like that surgeon that's taking care of that patient that is now measured on their outcomes, individuals with COPD, heart failure, pneumonia, coronary artery bypass graft surgery, and the elective hip and knee, the ones that are coming in, getting a new knee or a new hip and readmitting because things weren't followed through with. Concurrently to my Sleep Navigator program that I also had a perioperative program with the joint and hip. And it was crazy to me, the amount. The statistics were the individuals that scored a 3 or 4 on their stop bang, 76% of them had obstructive sleep apnea. For the individuals that scored a 5 or higher, 95% had obstructive sleep apnea. And you're talking about a patient base that were not being asked that stop bang. The anesthesiologists were, evaluating the Mallampati score and all that for their safety while they're in the hospital system, but nothing was being done to create that safety once they go home. The pain medication that they're on, all of that, nothing was being, no education was being done. So to me, that is such a key area to where we can help. So a lot of it is, I working a night shift and coming into this world from a night tech to this world, it's like, okay, what does this all mean, right? What does this mean to a sleep navigator? Well, it's important to understand what an inpatient sleep screening navigator program can do for your hospital. Getting your program approved in your hospital will take understanding readmission penalties and bridging the gap of how your sleep expertise and comorbid conditions can help impact those numbers. Let's review some studies that help support the value of the program. A lot of times these studies can help if you bring them to your hospital administration, you bring them to that medical director, that's kind of speaking their language and helps to understand, how to get this approved. So physicians at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital recognize OSA early in hospitalized COPD patients reduces readmission. Screening for OSA in patients admitted with COPD exacerbation is a simple and early intervention that should be encouraged to help reduce hospital readmissions in this patient population. Another study done by the physicians at the University of Pennsylvania, data indicates that hospital readmission and emergency department visits 30 days after discharge were significantly lower in patients with cardiac disease and sleep disordered breathing who actually adhered to PAP treatment than those that were not adherent. And a study done with University of Chicago and at Pritzker School of Medicine showed 2 out of every 5 inpatients older than 50 years screened at high risk for OSA. 2 out of every 5. Those screening at high risk have worse in-hospital sleep quantity and quality. There's a cohort study done at a Veterans Affairs hospital that indicates CPAP adherence is associated with decreased all-cause and cardiovascular cause 30-day readmissions. And the rapid response system, so you heard me mention a little bit about the rapid response system, and most of you who work in a hospital system are probably familiar with it. Me, when I transitioned from the night into a hospital system, I had to learn a whole other language. But for those that do not know, a rapid response system is a safety tool designed for early detection and intervention of a deteriorating patient on the general floor in the hospital. Dr. Sharma and colleagues discovered an association of increased rate of rapid response events in high-risk OSA patients and a reduction of the risk with PAP intervention in the compliant group. So you're looking at a group of studies that really help us frame how we need to be approaching when we pitch this study. What does it mean to them? We know the importance of sleep. We understand what it means to us and the patient, but what does it mean to them? How can we help that nurse's life? How can we help those outcomes that that hospital is measuring? The Joint Commission, a lovely Joint Commission, I'm sure many of you are aware of that. It always kind of makes my heart beat a little faster, and it's not just because I'm giving a webinar. The Joint Commission is just, if they come around your hospital, you always try to duck and hide. But anyways, they cite the following concerns regarding OSA. They totally recognize a lack of training for healthcare professionals to screen for and recognize OSA. They also see a failure to even assess those patients, a lack of guidelines for how we're caring and treating those individuals. We're not appropriately monitoring those patients once we identify that. And there's a lack of communication among healthcare providers regarding patients with OSA or potential risk factors associated with OSA. And there's a lack of post-operative evaluation and treatment for OSA. So all of these things are items that we in the sleep field would come in and immediately see. There's a lack of communication. They're not doing any kind of things to safeguard their patients. There's a lot of hospitals that have implemented certain, policies and procedures in there, but there's still not a really good end-to-end solution. So what does it mean to the hospital system? What does it mean to the physician? So physicians and quality measures, and the Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act dramatically changed how licensed healthcare providers are paid by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. MACRA created the quality payment program that repealed the sustainable growth rate formula. It changed the way that Medicare rewards clinicians for value over volume. So it's not really just the sheer amount of patients that you can see. What value is this physician providing for that patient? And it streamlines multiple quality programs under the new merit-based incentive payment system. And it gives bonus payments for participation in eligible alternative payment models. So this kind of frames you in the mind of what is a physician looking at when they're seeing this? How can we help that physician? So this gives a little bit more detail of the MIPS and the APMs programs. So under the MIPS, you're going to see a very coordinated, forward-looking framework for clinicians to successfully participate in this. So it rewards value in one of two ways, whether the MIPS program or the advanced APMs. And what it does under the MIPS program is it's looking for the quality, resource use, clinical practice improvement activities, and advancing care information. And under the APMs, it's looking the bundle payment models. How much are we going to get paid providing the best care underneath that patient with the diagnosis and what we're recommending? So how they calculate this and the percentages underneath it, the physician score for the 2019 MIPS performance year is divided and weighted into 4 different categories. And if you look at these categories, the quality of care is 45%. Interoperability, so it's not even just going in and figuring out in one system that doesn't work with another system. They're actually being, graded on this, right? And the cost, and then what activities are you doing to improve it? So scores in each weighted category are calculated by first extrapolating the proportion of points earned from the total possible points in the weighted category, which then will be multiplied by the performance category weight. And ultimately, another important thing to note that due to COVID, they've actually dropped this to where it's down to 0% due to everything. I think there's so little known with the outcomes with this that they're not measuring that, at least until December 31st, 2020. Who knows what 2021 will bring us, but as of right now, that is not being measured. So again, this was kind of my face when I was trying to figure it out. Again, everybody needs sleep. We should treat sleep, right? We're eager back here to help, but what does it mean? And this is why I go over that, is understanding what it means and why is this important. Sleep Navigator programs can potentially help physicians meet all those metrics needed to satisfy those categories. We can help with their process and structure. We can help with the intermediate outcome, the actual outcome, and the patient-reported outcome, the efficiency of it, and obviously the patient engagement and patient experience. We can provide that empathy for that. And then technology can help with interoperability and the electronic exchange of health information using certified electronic health record technology. So merging those two worlds can help these physicians create those outcomes of how they're measured. And it help in understanding how to explain that and how to bring that to a physician, I think, is talking in the language that in items that they have to worry about. So let's help them out. Now that we know what it means to the physician, let's take a look at making the connection with your patients. So there's this concept of patient or consumer. And you might ask, why is that important? They're in the hospital seeking care, or they're, but again, patients receive that care while consumers make choices. And I think this is important because we need them to buy into their health outcomes, right? We need them to understand what their diagnoses mean and give them that buy-in with it. So patients who are involved in their own care choices, known as shared decision-making, they're believed to have better success with their healthcare. Kind of like, it's not my idea, it's your idea, or it's not your idea, it's my idea, right? And then I'll say yes. They have better outcomes when involved in their own medical education. And the patient understands their options, risks, and expectations. They are taking control at a time that they often feel out of control. They're in the hospital system, a lot is happening, doctors are coming in and out, nurses are coming in and out. It's a scary time. And if we can help them take back some of that decision-making control, they're going to buy into those outcomes a lot better. So when you're looking at an inpatient program, what are the elements? What should you be looking at when framing it and when building the bones of an inpatient program? Determining your champion. So it takes constant passion and dedication and drive to get this program up and going. And so people don't forget about it. I think it's out of sight, out of mind. And So whether that champion is a sleep navigator, or whether it's your sleep medical director, maybe it's a cardiologist, pulmonologist, or neurologist, nurse practitioners. Nurse practitioners have been wonderful with these type of programs as well. Administration, nursing leader. There's so many different ones that you can count on, and you can't forget the data analytics that your IT department can provide, and care coordinators or discharge planners. My program was huge around those care coordinators and discharge planners, because really, if you're thinking about that continuum of care, that's what their job is, and they can help you facilitate that. And also to identify the true goal of the program. So how are you going to build this around, and what do you want your outcomes to be? And that helps you kind of guide and create what you want. So is it patient safety? Is it creating certain policies and procedures like a wristband, a blue or whatever color wristband? So for patients that are at risk for OSA immediately, kind of like when you see a fall risk, they know there's certain policies and procedures in place that help, keep that patient safe. And there's reducing inpatient costs and liability, providing the diagnostic procedures that are conducted on inpatients prior to discharge. And the models that I've seen created with that are the purpose is to reduce readmissions, and they actually get that patient set up on PAP therapy before discharge. And that helps reduce those readmissions because they're getting them treated when they're discharged. Or it could be to generate professional consultations in-house or clinic that generate the outpatient revenue, diagnostic and titration studies performed after the patient is discharged, and coordinate that fast-track DME services and obtain ongoing compliance and adherence data. Also, this is kind of where I'm not seeing as much being done, but I think this is where technology is advancing at such a high rate, is the hospital analytics. What data can we pull from these EMRs? How can we analyze that data and maybe identify that patient population that is not as obvious to us? And it takes out the human error with it. It takes out the time that it takes with it. How can we pull that data and use it to our advantage? And also, to generate the DME revenue. What kind of revenue would that provide your DME if that's within house? So I always say you have to begin with not only who, but the right who. You have to get the right people in the right positions first, and everything then will fall into place. There are certain skill sets, certain items that I found were kind of integral to doing this role. Like I said, I think there was quite the learning curve from the skill set that I had as a night technologist to, that day staff, and even the next step with this navigator. And what I found within this navigator role was a clinical background was so important, and that understands that I understood how to educate in multiple ways to meet that patient population where they're at. Everybody learns differently, and you have to understand the multiple ways in which to approach a patient and do that pretty fast. And it's the ability to sell the patient and other medical staff on the importance of untreated sleep apnea and other sleep disorders. I know it sounds like such common sense to us, but you're going to feel so much better, but it just doesn't quite hit that, right? It doesn't quite sink into them as much. And you have to find ways to sell the patient on their own health. And you have to present it in a concise, efficient way and lead others through the care plan. So not only are you leading the patient, but you're leading the physicians, you're leading the nurses, you're leading all these other medical disciplines through what this looks like. So one of the key things that I would say, one of the key skill sets is understand how to build those relationships. So the multiple referral sources are key. You have to cultivate that mutual respect with the other staff members. You don't want to be seen as a burden to them. You don't want to be seen that you're just in the way, and what is sleep doing here and how does that even factor? Learn that communication style of the discipline you are working with. Learn how physicians communicate. Learn how nurse practitioners, discharge planners, and how administration. With the referral source, I always called it my team of respiratory therapists. They were not tasked with doing this role at all, but once they knew who I was, and once they were educated on what I was doing, I would get left and right. They'd come back to the department or they'd find me on the floor. They'd page me. Oh, hey, I was working with this one patient, Andrea. Have you talked to him? Have you seen him? You should probably go see him. And it created such a strong base to create that referral. And again, explaining, the inpatient realm to the outpatient world. So it took me forever to explain that they weren't going to be getting just ordering the sleep study does not mean it would be done while they're inpatient, right? And understanding that how I say things might be shifted a little bit differently in the inpatient world, and taking that time to listen to them, taking that time to understand that there is this difference. And it's always, there's nothing without politics, right? We live in a world of politics. So be aware of your environment and the culture around it. Every hospital system that I would go in had a different culture and a different pecking order and a different way in which they did things. And it's important to go into it and understand the rhythms, and dress appropriately. So something that I ran into was all the technologists in our health system wore the same color scrubs. And at first I would go up there and I would round on my patients, and they would think I was a lab tech. They would think I was an x-ray tech. They would think I was all of the above besides sleep. And it took me so long to even explain all those items to them and explain, no, I'm sleep. What's sleep doing in here? And then a whole nother time to explain exactly what I was doing. And so what I learned was I looked at the other educators on the floor, like the diabetes and the COPD educators, and I saw they were in nice street clothes with a white lab coat. And once I started doing that, 100%, they knew who I was. They knew that I was different from every other person that went into those rooms, and it saved me so much time. And also fostering integrated care and a sense of community. Help me help you, right? Help me look at the nurses, like go above and beyond and understand how they are taking care of their patients, and what role do you play in that? What role can you help them? And fostering that sense of community and care, and giving compliments when you see them it sounds so simple, but doing that makes them want you around, makes them want you to work well with you, play nice in the sandbox, right? Like it makes them say, okay, not only are you fine, I'm going to let you take care of my patient, but I'm also going to ask how I can help, right? But you have to be aware of timing. So I learned this, very early on, is that there's rounding times, there's a rhythm to the hospital. There's other important testing that can be done. We are there because we specialize in sleep and we are the experts, but we need to be able to offer our knowledge base in order to help the physician take care of their patient in the best possible way. So understanding that when there are certain times where the patient is not going to be open to talk to you. And frankly, I totally get it. If you're waiting for surgery, 100%, you are just going to nod and smile at me to get rid of me, and you're not going to really listen to me. So I think the most important thing is to understand those rhythms and kind of follow that patient's care, and understand when the best time to talk to them. That physician is running off to 5 million other patients, but it's still important that you talk to them, and still important that they understand what's happening. So communicating that concisely and summarizing that care plan is very important. And use basic etiquette. It seems pretty common sense that to knock and ask to enter, to smile and tell them who you are, make eye contact, give them that respect, because that patient sitting in that bed could be a CEO of a company, and they are reduced to that same vulnerable state as every other individual, every other patient in that hospital. And I think when you work in a hospital system, it just becomes your job. And I think you become kind of numb to the fact of how that patient could be feeling, how that patient could be nervous or scared, or just, kind of reduced to something less than what they are in the outside world. And, make them comfortable, make them understand that you're here to help them, and listen to them. Like I said, the previous screen, at time, let's hurry things along. And the things that patients would tell me when I actually took the time to sit down with them and listen was amazing. For example, I had A male in his 60s admitted for congestive heart failure exacerbation, AFib, and fluid retention. He was diagnosed with OSA about 5 years ago, but became non-compliant after suffering an injury. And because of that injury, he had to sleep in a recliner. As I was discussing the need to come in for another sleep study, it's always good to kind of navigate the barriers that potentially might arise. And he was so worried and nervous looking. And he was like, well, we're taking care of my father-in-law with dementia. And I need to pick a night that won't leave my wife alone. I got to figure out, the care for him. So when we see and try to navigate that patient's care and get them in, there's so much other things going on underneath the surface. And if we help to address some of that, it helps them take away those barriers. Like, okay, well, why wouldn't I come in, right? And he ended up just breaking down in front of me. And after some digging, I found there was some history of mental illness. And I asked him outright, would you like to talk to somebody while you're here? Because he was making comments, I'm just an added stress, I shouldn't be here. And I told the physician that, and she was so appreciative that I caught that, because that helped him with his diagnosis in there. It helped him stay adherent to the treatment plan. It helped them understand kind of where his mind was at. And it's something that I feel like we do for our sleep physicians all the time, right? It's, as a night tech, the stuff that your patients would tell you, it's like, wow, it's like we're a therapist. I mean, and I know everybody I've heard stories left and right about this, but that's awesome though, because we could be the eyes and ears for that physician. You must listen and find that connection with them. And that could be the difference in their care pathway. And again, I think I mentioned that learn how to sell to that doctor. Every doctor has different, they're being measured differently, or they're being with different outcomes, or they have different goals with it. So learn how to understand from that specific, medical discipline what they're looking for. And then also learn how to sell to a patient. So again, like as I was saying, gain and build their trust and relate your solution to their life. How will it help their life? How will that, by getting their obstructive sleep apnea treated, that's going to allow them to see their grandchildren more, to play with them, to have more energy, just different stuff like that. And involve them in that decision. Make them feel not as helpless as what they're feeling at that moment. But I can't say this enough. Listen to learn, not to present already formed ideas. We go in and you see a neck circumference that's 20 inches, 22 inches, you automatically know in your head where you're going to go. But they don't. I mean, maybe they've never been talked to about this. Really, like that was a big difference in doing the overnight studies with doing this, because we see patients that have already been told they might have obstructive sleep apnea in the hospital. You might be their very first one that talked to them about that, and understand that you need to listen to all these. And the key ingredient is that passion for patient care. You have to have that passion in order to convey that and help them bridge that gap. So the inpatient sleep screening model, each hospital system is different and therefore need programs that cater to each unique needs and patient population. As I helped other hospitals shape their inpatient sleep screening program, there were key areas that I needed to address. So the basic bones, you're going to want to find a way to build awareness or screen that patient. Identify what patient population to target, what screening tool are you going to utilize, and identify the goal of the program. And this is another area where I see technology and AI kind of exploding everything with this, because they're going to make this so much more efficient. They're going to identify this at so much more of a faster and accurate rate than we can right now. And it's going to be huge. But then you also have to know how to safeguard and educate. So education to the medical disciplines and how to safeguard their patient, and what does it mean to them? What does a sleep apnea patient mean to them? And then figure out the evaluation assessment. So evaluate the patients at risk, educate, assess their needs, and discuss with physicians that recommended care plan. In the diagnosis, so identify that best way, whether that's a HSAT, an attended study, in hospital, or post-discharge. What is going to best suit that patient? And make sure that they're treated timely. Implement therapy, loaner PAP program, that was also huge with it. So the concept of a patient going home, you want to be able to test them outpatient, right? Because an inpatient might not always be the best, area to test that patient. But you don't want to discharge them with this. It's like, oh, by the way, we think that you have severe apnea, but we're just going to let you go home now. A loaner PAP program, working closely with your local DME or, perhaps your own DME, it provides a loaner PAP until they can actually come in to, for therapy. The DME can take a credit card, and most patients I found were very happy to pay that fee to get it because it got them out of the hospital. And I had so many physicians tell me we would have kept that patient in 2, 3, 4 days longer. But knowing that they're going home on that bi-level, I feel comfortable discharging them. So something to consider. And what other solutions will you find to help your patient succeed? And then, of course, you have to monitor adherence. It can't just be identification and let's get them treated without ensuring, that they're adherent. And what will you do to ensure your program shows the outcomes needed to make it a success? You have to track and report. Collecting the data and analyzing the outcomes is an integral part of an inpatient sleep screening program. A Sleep Navigator can utilize the advances in technology to make that job so much easier and finally show the impact a screening program can have to the metrics that are already being measured by the hospital system. Sleep deserves a seat at the table with every other medical discipline. What will it take from us in the field to evolve to that level? Intellectual humility. Walk into every environment, as I brought up the other medical disciplines, everywhere we go, and asking, what is it that we can learn? How can I do what I know already and do it differently? In a world where science and technology are growing at a rapid pace, we need to adapt how we approach our roles. Intellectual humility keeps an open mind and allows us to see these opportunities in these new places. Trust your instinct and learn to open your eyes to new ways of doing things. Bring your expertise into a new situation and try to find new solutions. So what's your next step? The role of the sleep health educator is the future of sleep, especially in the inpatient world. As we empower ourselves with everything technology and AI have to offer, where can we see ourselves grow and adapt? Ask yourself where you see areas that need the advanced skill set of a sleep expert and find ways to create that role. The CCSH credential makes sure we have the proper skill set in order to sit at that table with other medical disciplines and satisfy the growing needs of the healthcare environment. So how do we do that? How do we take where we are at now and transition it to where we need to be? I joke around, of course I talk to myself. I know what I'm doing, right? I need expert advice. But it's a really good dialogue to have, right? So expertise means doing things the same way that we've always done. Well, guess what that leads to? Predictability. Doing things the same way leads to the same outcomes. The definition of insanity is doing things the same way every time and expecting different outcomes. But yet we can't just expect to throw caution to the wind and kind of experiment here and there. Things are going to explode on us. The perfect example is my sleep program. They had a company before I came in doing it that just thought, oh, well, how hard is that? I could totally do that. I can ask some questions on a sleep questionnaire and recommend a sleep study. What they didn't have is that empathy and education and that expertise background. But it also takes somebody that's going to experiment with the program. Every day I would try something new. Does this work? Nope. Does that work? Nope. It took me understanding that continuously experimenting was the key. So where do we go? Where is the future? AI-aided analysis could help clinicians make diagnosis more quickly and accurately, getting patients on the right course of treatment faster. But perhaps more excitingly, apps or other programs that incorporate AI could allow clinicians to monitor their patients remotely, alerting them to issues or changes that arise between appointments, and helping them incorporate that knowledge into treatment plans. How can AI help keep our patients adherent to, and kind of predict who is not going to be adherent? AI isn't meant to replace humans, but instead provide data and insights that will streamline treatment. According to Dr. Dennison in a published research review in Time magazine last year, with AI's ability to diagnose disease, technology can help clinicians and doctors focus on the human elements of medicine. rather than getting bogged down in the minutia of diagnosis and data collection. Dennison continues by stating artificial intelligence may allow us to have more time in our day to spend actually communicating effectively and being more human. Rather than being diagnostic machines, doctors and clinicians, in my view, can provide some of that empathy that can get swallowed up by the business of what we do. Sleep health education is the future of our field as we see a shift towards health outcomes and prevention of such outcomes. Teaching wellness will be key. Preventative health will be key. Let's shift from being reactive and solving what is right in front of our face to being proactive and potentially preventing such problems from occurring. We must look at things differently if we want to grow with the ever-changing healthcare field and allow technology to empower us to create better outcomes for our patients and the sleep field. Let's embrace our evolving roles and be the change we want to see for the future of sleep medicine. Thank you. Are there any questions?
With all of the hospitals that you worked with, did you ever receive pushback? And if so, how do you advise overcoming it?
Pushback? What are you talking about? Life is a piece of cake. Like, no, that was actually, I mean, I would highly suggest, when I say you have to have the drive and the passion and the dedication and really believe in what we're doing, oh, I was told no, even after my program was in the hospital. I was told, you know, how is this working or whatever. I think it's just finding the right way in which to communicate with, know the key players, right? So know who's going to be that decision maker and really find ways in which to communicate effectively with them. What does it mean to them? And find ways. So whether that's the medical director, whether that's a physician that's going to champion it. When I talk about the concept of a physician or a concept of a champion, understand that there's individuals within that can be that person who's never going to stop, you know, who's never going to stop fighting for this and never, you know, the papers with the hospital readmissions, look up your hospital readmission and see what are their pain points. How are they measured, right? What penalties did they get, and frame your response and frame your pitch around that. You know, frame your pitch to another good way to look at it is look at how many admissions on a monthly basis. And if we think about one in 4 people have obstructive sleep apnea, to that point of everybody should get a sleep study. While my theory is that even higher than 1 in 4 individuals have sleep apnea when they're admitted. So if you have 1,000 admits that month, 250 is what kind of a number to frame it. So if you frame it around that to them as well, understanding the comorbid conditions and what are admitting and understanding how to frame your response to them and saying, well, sleep, okay, well, about 50% of your congestive heart failure patients are going to have sleep apnea. You know, knowing, understanding what their pain points are and framing it towards that, I think was a huge way in order to get these programs approved.
Fantastic. All right, everybody who joined us, thank you so much. Andrea, thank you, and I will talk to you
very much. Okay,
bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.